So in this short session, we're going to be doing some really simple tutorials about application programming based on the applications tutorial and listings book, which if you've been watching the slideshow up till now, you may have seen. And there's lots of special offers on the drag and drop website today. And the book that I've taken this 2 or 3 mini tutorials from is you can buy on special offer with free postage. So there'll be time for some questions at the end of this. What I'm going to do is to type in the programs live on the screen. So if you've got your computer, if you're on your computer, you can type along as well if you want on your RISC machine. On the other hand, if you just want to sit back and have a look, that's fine. When we finish this session, the slideshow that's going to be rotating round will include the programs that I'm going to type in. So you're very welcome to take screenshots or whatever. So the first thing we're going to do is to write a short program to give us information about what's under the pointer and get information about the coordinates and the icons and the windows, which is very useful for, or quite basic to application programming. Then we're going to move on to writing a very simple program to put some stuff on the icon bar, which is the, as you probably know, is the grey area down here where my mouse pointer is. And then finally, we're going to build on that to respond to mouse clicks. Some very simple stuff that's forms the basis of application programming. Lots more in the application and tutorials book, which, as I say, is on special offer today, highly popular. As a technical aside for people here, the mouse pointer here that I've got is done by a small special program, and the slides that you were seeing earlier on the rotating carousel, that's just done by a small basic program to display some draw files. And we'll be talking about that in the next issue of Drag and Drop, which is due out at the end of July, beginning of August, somewhere around then. So without any further ado, let's type in our first program. So in your text editor, I use Edit, but there's plenty of others like Strong Ed, Zap, but I use Edit. I tend to use Edit because that's what I grew up with. So our first line of the program will be, let me zoom in on that a bit so you can see it, something like a very simple app. And this is all done in BBC Basic, by the way, which comes built into every RISC machine that there ever was. And what we usually do in BBC Basic as a simple error trap is something like this. Which just reports what's gone wrong and reports the line number. Now, when we program applications, we can't do it as simply as that. What we have to do is to instruct RISC to shut the application down. So we need a slightly longer or more enhanced version of this error trapping line. And this is done by inserting this. And that kind of thing that reads sys and then in speech marks wimp something or other, that's just one of several, well, many calls that we use for application programming. And what that does is to tell RISC to shut down the program that we're writing and report the error like we would in normal basic programs. Well, I say normal, the single tasking stuff. The next line that we usually start with is telling RISC-OS that we want to register our application with the interface, with the system interface, sometimes called the window manager or the WIMP manager. So it's WIMP initialize. Then there's some numbers. Don't worry too much about what these are. There's some magic numbers you have to type in. That you need to worry about is what's at the end, and that just is the name of the application we're writing. Next, we dimension the block of memory. This is to receive messages and information and so on that the system RISC-OS is telling us about. For example, mouse clicks, mouse coordinates, icons under the pointer, and so on. I've called it B, the letter B for Bertie, but you can pretty much call it anything you want, as long as you're consistent and you remember to refer to B or whatever it is later on in the program. This is a procedure that we'll come to in a minute, but basically it gets the information about the pointer and so on. The next one is another procedure which we'll come to in later, just a sec. That tells us that updates the information about the pointer coordinates. And then usually in all RISC-OS multitasking programs, we have a loop which looks something like that. It's another sys or system call. As you know, and generally speaking, they'll begin something WIMP, something or other. So earlier on, we had WIMP closed down. This is WIMP poll, and that just tells RISC-OS to put information about mouse clicks and so on into the block, which, as I say, we've called B. Then we get the information about the mouse coordinates and so on later on. This next line checks the current mouse coordinates against the old coordinates, and if they're different, it puts an update at the top of the screen, which this will become clear in a minute. This line, until in key -113, it's not the usual way you would write WIMP, multitasking WIMP applications, but for our purposes and to keep things simple, we'll do it like this. And what happens is that this tells RISC-OS to continue running the WIMP program until the escape key is pressed. As I say, usually we'd have some menu item or something like that to quit the program. That's the proper way of doing it, but programming menus and stuff like that is another whole chunk of the application writing thing, which we haven't got time to go into here. Now we're going to write the procedures. This is another WIMP call, WIMP get pointer info. And what that does is to get the system to put information into our memory block B about where the pointer is. So this line here, I'll just bring my mouse pointer over. That gets the X coordinate and that gets the Y coordinate. And if you know your bits and bytes and words, you'll know that you'll see that the first word in the block B is X, the X coordinate. Second word in the block is the Y coordinate. The third bit of information we get out of here is the window, because we can get details about the window underneath the pointer, and also the icon underneath the pointer. what RISC does is to number all the windows and all the icons within Windows in this block. So that's the procedure that gets information for us. This next procedure basically just displays all the information that we got using the proc get procedure at the top of the screen. Now, again, this is not the way you'd usually do things in WIMP programming, because we're just going to use a simple basic command to print information at the top of the screen, which you wouldn't usually do. You wouldn't usually plaster information all over the desktop, but to do anything else would need quite a bit more programming knowledge than we've got time to go into today. So let's just check that we've written that correctly. We're going to print this stuff in yellow text on the red background. This line prints the information about the windows and icons under the pointer, and then just transfers the current coordinates, the current x coordinates and the current y coordinate into the old coordinate. That's x and y into OX and OY. Now, got some old stuff in there, so I'll just clear that out. Now, excuse me. So save it as something like, oh, I should have told you before that in edit you have to set up the sort of program that you're typing in which case this is basic, but in the next kind of mini tutorial I'll go through that again. So I don't know, we can call it @1. And I'll just refresh the desktop because for some reason the colors aren't showing properly. But anyway, what you should now do is to double click that application. And if you can see right at the top left-hand corner of the screen, it's showing us the pointer of coordinates in brackets there. And then this long number here is RISC's way of identifying the window number. It will be some long and complicated hexadecimal number. And then the icon number. So if I show you an example of, or a sensible example of what that means, if we go over to the display manager here and click on it, it comes up with a little dialog box. And as you move the pointer over the different areas, you'll see in the top left-hand corner, it thinks that that's icon number 0. And you look at the number on the right-hand side and you'll see against the icon, that's icon 2, that's icon 8, icon 4. And all of these little areas of the window have their own kind of IDs, which is how we, in our application programming, enables us to work out, well, if you want to click on that icon, what does it do? Which icon do we display text and information and so on? So that's one of the things that forms the basis of application writing, particularly that proc get procedure. And if I show you a picture, show you that pictorially, as you see in this window here that says mouse click block at the top of it. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different bits of information we can get out of RISC to tell us where the mouse pointer is, which of the 3 buttons or combinations of 3 buttons have been pressed, the window ID or window handle, as it's more properly called, and the icon ID or icon handle. So let's shut that down. And as I said earlier, all of this information, these pictures and illustrations are going to be on the slideshow later on. So let's now move on to another little tutorial to put something on the icon bar down here, and a new window pops up, or however you do it in whatever text editor you're doing. But as I say, I'm old-fashioned and I like edit. So let's, if I zoom in again, let's start with our usual 2 lines at the start, or should I say a rem statement to tell us what we're doing. And the line to deal with errors. Again, that's the line to tell RISC that we want to start our own application with the 2 magic numbers and the application name there, which I've just called MUG Show. Then our line to dimension the memory block. This is the, as I said earlier on, the block of memory for RISC to tell us about if the mouse is being moved over our window or clicked on something and so on. But in this program, we need to dimension another block of memory, which I'm calling U for epsilon. But again, you can call it what you want. But this is a block of memory that we need for the text for icons. And I should say that an icon is just a rectangular part of the screen, and it can contain text, or it can contain a picture, which more properly is called a sprite in RISC terms, but whatever it is, it's a graphic. So you can have text, graphics, or both. So this is the memory that we need to put the icon text in. What I'm doing here is using a very small procedure, which we'll come to in a minute, which creates an icon for us. It makes the icon a bit easier to create and program than normally, but there's a magic number there, the one that begins with the ampersand, the one that begins with 5 zeros and ends with 102, or what I should have done is make the last 3 digits of that something a bit easier. Those numbers there, they all the digits mean things. I'll just show you something before I continue along. That's basically a graphical illustration of everything we can tell RISC about the icon we're creating. It looks a bit horrendous, and it's a lot to digest first of all, so I'll come back to that in a minute, because what we're going to do is just create our icon by a simple procedure. Just notice my desktop colors have come back to something a bit more high quality. So let's Anyway, let's continue with this. Now, next we need to choose a picture or a sprite that we want to display. You can design your own sprites and use them, but that's probably a bit beyond the time and the scope of what we can do today. So what I'm going to do is, in RISC there's a load of built-in icons, and you can have a look and find, if you go into the apps icon on the icon bar and select open $, it will bring up a screen like this. Let me get rid of those so it's a bit clearer. And then if you go into resources and then scroll down to WIMP and then see the sprites file there, double click on that to open it, and you can see all the icons that are built into RISC by default. What we're going to do now is to choose an icon. It can be any one of these really. I'm going to choose this big red stop icon, and underneath its name is just program. So in your code here, I'm going to type that sprite name. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether you have capitals, uppercase or lowercase or what. It can be something like that, or it can be in all capitals. RISC doesn't care what case you use for sprite names, although RISC itself tends to refer to sprites all in lowercase. And then we'll come that one at the end we'll come to later on, but just know for now that the -1 at the beginning tells RISC to put the icon on the right hand side of the icon bar. These next group of 4 numbers, that gives the two numbers here, which are 0, gives the bottom left coordinate of the icon, and these 2 numbers give the height and the width of the icon. We'll fiddle around with those numbers later on for demonstration. This number here is, we'll come to in a minute. You can change all of these numbers as I was showing you in that rather complicated diagram, but for now, the very last digit, that's the 8th digit along, for displaying a sprite icon on anywhere, that has to be 2, and that's all you really need to know for now. And then we've got our standard loop here, like we saw in the previous program. Oh no, that's not the one we need. To get RISC to put all the activity about mouse clicks and so on into the block of memory at B. And those 1, 2, 3, 4, those 4 lines there, the repeat loop and the sys wimp close down, are pretty much standard in all the application programming. It's this next procedure which is the one that creates the icon. Now, don't worry too much about understanding this procedure, but it just makes it a bit easier to get our icon on the icon bar without too much hassle. By the way, this is one of the standard procedures that you'll read about in the Application and Tutorials cookbook. So Applications and Tutorials listings book. I called it the cookbook earlier on, but then decided to change it to the listings book. For those who are interested, this slightly more advanced information, but what this does is to set up the block of memory for the icon information. And as you can see, there's probably about half a dozen or so different things that RISC needs to know about the icon, like the, as I say, the bottom left-hand corner of where it's going to put the icon, what's going to be in the icon, whether it's text or sprite or both. There's another WIMP call there. You'll see WIMP create icon. Just check that I've got that right. If it isn't, then the line that traps the error right at the top will soon save us. And what I'm going to do is, let me shut that down. Call that up to. And then we can double click it to see if it works. Let me zoom out a bit for that. And yes, it does, because if you see right over here on the icon bar, we've got that stop sign appearing. So let's go back to the program here. And what we're going to do next is to get RISC to display some text in the icon instead of a graphic. So what we do here now for a text only icon, we change one of these digits, the first two of these digits. The first one is the background color of the text, and the second one here is the foreground. All of these colors, there's 8 shades of gray and black, and there's a few reds, greens, blues, and so on. And if you want to know what the colors are in your edit menu here, I'll just show you. You can see that by the little menu here. As I say, there's about 8 shades of white to black and a few colors down the bottom. So what I'm doing is just to have the background color as black and the foreground color as white. So that's 7 and 0. So 7 for the black background, 0 for the white background. You can have anything you want, as long as it's a number between 0 and 15 in hexadecimal, but don't worry too much about that. And the next number we need to change in here is, we had 3 so what we do for a text icon is to do 3, 2, 1. Don't worry too much about what those numbers mean. Just know that you have to have 3, 1, 2, 1 at the end to display some text. Now, instead of the sprite name in between the speech marks, we put the text we want to display. So something like. Now, important point here, we have to tell RISC in advance how much room we want to display the icon. And it's quite often, unless you use one of these automated template editors, such as WinEd, we haven't got time to discuss that today, but you have to tell RISC in advance how much or how wide you want the icon to be. And a good kind of rule of thumb is to allow 20 per letter plus a bit more. So I think I've got, is it in that text there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 19. So 19 characters, 19 times 20, whatever that is. But sometimes it's a bit of trial and error as to how wide you need this. You need the icon to be. Bit of fiddling around as there usually is in WIMP programming. So that's the width. We might need to adjust that to 270 later. But the height, and again, a rough estimate is 50 per line of text. So we change the first line of that to what we need to display a text icon. And that should be enough to get it to display the text. So let's save that as 3, let's say, and try running that to see if we get a result. And there you go, down there, if you look down the right hand side, right bottom of the icon bar, we've got it displaying it's the MUG show. So now we're going to be a bit more adventurous and ask RISC to display text and a sprite. So how are we doing for time? I'm aware that I'm going a bit over, but just do this quickly. Instead of typing in the sprite name or the text name in this line, the prop make icon, or MK as I called it, what we have to do is to dimension yet another block of memory. I'm calling it V. This is for the sprite name, or more technically referred to as the validation string, but don't worry too much about that. So we've got our V. Then in the proc make icon line, which is that one, we need to adjust some numbers again. First of all, we need to change the number on the end to a B. Don't worry too much about that. It's all to do with bits and bytes and setting bits and pieces in the number, but just know that that's what you have to do to get it to display both sprite and text. Now this line, that's the text we're going to display again, so we don't need to adjust that. But at the end, instead of the 1, we have to change that to V, and you'll see why in a minute. And what we do is in the block of memory at V, we put the sprite name in there. Now this does get a bit long, convoluted and involved. But what we do is we put an S, and then we put the sprite name in there. So instead of putting the sprite name in this section, we have to put it in the block of memory using the basic command $V equals, and then the sprite name, but prefixed with S. And those are the amendments we need to make for displaying both sprite and text. So let's try running that to see how that works. So there you are, we've got sort of a sprite and a text showing, but what's happened is that in this number here, we have to fiddle around to get the system to put the sprite in the right place and put the text in the right place. Something we haven't got time to go through today, but just to show you
out a bit. Sorry, can you just zoom out a bit? Right. I can't quite see the icon bar. That's it. That's fine. Thanks.
If I just make that simple amendment and run the program again. we've got something slightly different there. And as well as you have to, in that diagram I showed you earlier on, which is a bit hard to digest to start with, so that's why I haven't referred to it too much. But what you do is you have to kind of adjust these numbers and fiddle around with the width and so on to get the sprite and the text to display properly. What's happened here is that I haven't allowed a sufficient height for the sprite and text to be displayed at the same time. So I'm just changed that number to 110 to make it slightly higher, and that's enough to make the text and the icon so that they don't clash. The only other thing is that it's a bit too high up on the icon bar if you're a perfectionist. So again, a bit of fiddling around to get it to display properly, but I'm going to adjust the Y coordinate by putting a minus number in there. And this one looks a bit better. So it's all about adjusting numbers and coordinates and so on. And there are editors around, programs around to do it for you. But what happens in the book, the applications and tutorials listing book, it goes into quite a lot of detail to get you to understand really at the nuts and bolts level as to what goes on. So I think we're actually over time. So unfortunately, won't have time to go into the bit about detecting mouse clicks. But as I say, what will happen is that the running slideshow that we'll put back on after I've finished here will show you how to do that. So I will stop there and come back on screen in theory.